All right. How's everyone doing? Good? Well, we are going to try and make it conversational, so please gather up some energy. We'll start with a quick introduction and then get into the topic. Hi, I'm Nidhi. I think I've met a few of you from last year. Excited to see some new faces. I lead marketing and customer experience for commercial bank innovation economy at JP Morgan Chase. I'm in transition to a startup, so that's sort of where I am. Taylor.
Nice to meet you all. I'm Taylor. I lead our solutions consulting team at Persado. So my team really sits between customers and our product team, understanding pain points, so hopefully we get to talk about some of those, and then different solutions to them. Persado is a marketing tech company, like so many, but we're really focused on the language and the words that you use. How do you know what you're saying to your consumers is driving the actions that you hope, and then how do you actually get that out to market?
Awesome. Excited about that. Will?
Yeah, I'm Will McGinnis. I head up our strategy and growth for fullthrottle.ai. We are also a marketing tech platform, specifically focused on building net new first-party audiences and marketing to them, building your brand and growing your brand.
Yeah, I definitely want to double-click on that first-party data. I think there's some exciting things that your team is doing there. With that, let's start. I know there was a question on how many of you are already starting to use AI in your customer experience, but I would love to see it by show of your hand. If you're just starting to think about it, maybe let's raise hands. Just starting to think about it. Who is starting to use it more actively? Okay. 2, 3 people. What companies? Okay, so more for private wealth management? Private wealth management? Yes. Okay. There was another hand there. Who else is using it fully and they feel good about? Go ahead. What company are you with? Okay. Awesome. We'll get into some of that as well, but definitely chime in, share your insights. We want to make this conversational. And we chose this topic intentionally because customer experience is so critical these days. I think we are all spoiled by Amazons and Netflix of the world with the B2C experiences that we really are trying to push the bar for B2B and get there. And as marketers especially, I feel like there is a very unique opportunity for us to own customer experience. And the reason why I say that is, if you think about product owns product build, engineering has the dev, sales has revenue numbers, but as marketers, we are coordinating so much behind the scenes for all these stakeholders, but there is a very unique opportunity as you think about customer experience. No one owns that today in a company, and especially the end-to-end, and to layer in Gen AI, personalization, there is a very unique opportunity to rethink that customer experience. So that's where we'll start, and we'll focus on 3 things today. How should you think about that end-to-end customer experience and the journeys? The second will be, how do you apply and personalize that customer experience to increase the goals and the throughput and the funnel metrics? And last but not the least is, our hope is to give you an actionable framework that all of you can walk out with and go and actually just get hands-on and start doing some of these things. So that's how we're thinking about this session. With that, let's start with customer experience and customer journeys end-to-end. And Will, I'd like to start with you, especially thinking about the first-party cookies and the data, right? Because we all know our personas. We all know sort of kind of the paths they follow. Of course, we want to let them choose their adventure as they come in, but it's all about the signals that we can collect. And I would love to get your perspective on how you are helping companies think through what that customer experience should look like and the data to collect throughout the journey. And before I give it over, sorry, one more thing I want to mention. I was particularly excited about this panel because I'm more from the business side, but both of my colleagues here or friends here are more on the vendor side. So you will get both of that kind of approach on how I'm thinking about business problems, and you are probably helping a lot of clients like me and JP Morgan and Chase and other companies. So please bring in that experience as well of what's the good, bad, and the ugly as you work with customers.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple answers to your question. I'll try to summarize it succinctly for you, but I think one of the biggest challenges today is blind spots, right? There's a lot of breakage when you think about third-party cookies in general, pixels, and all for generally from a consumer-facing standpoint, a good reason, right? Privacy, controlling your own data. But at the end of the day, you know, as marketers, we still want to, you know, have that right message, connect with the right individuals, and in our case, households, to get that message into the right places to drive that brand and drive that business forward. So one of the biggest challenges that I see for marketers today is not only connecting all those pieces, but actually fixing and finding those gaps where there is breakage. And I think the solve there is, you know, multifaceted. I don't think any one organization can solve that problem for you. And I think the uniqueness of the industry that we're in is kind of tying those pieces together in regard to if you're utilizing pixel-based identity graphs out there, you know, you're probably going to be around a 35% match rate, right? You have a big blind spot. Same goes for cookie-based. So doing I guess a overview of what you're utilizing today to figure out where your blind spots are, I think would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. So kind of laying out your customer journey and then starting to think about the data points and where the breakage is. And I know marketing tech stack for a lot of these companies, right? People build their marketing tech stack over time. So it's probably a combination of systems, and systems may not talk to each other seamlessly. So have you seen that come through as you work with your clients?
Yeah, so, you know, the other piece, the customer journey, right? You know, with breakage comes those disconnected stories as well. And so, you know, in a lot of instances, CDP has been a buzzword for the past couple of years. You know, customer data platform for those that haven't started looking at CDPs, but it's a giant undertaking. An undertaking that a lot of organizations that we've talked to don't really know what the outcome is desired to be.
Yeah.
They just know that they probably need to do it and get things together. A quick solve, I think, would be to look at ways that you can identify how those journeys are today. You can use CRM data or historical customer data. That's going to inform you a little bit, and that's what most organizations do. But take a step forward and look at what your customers are telling you today with the information that's available to you in utilizing, you know, all of those things that I talked about, pixel-based, cookie-based, non-cookie-based, things like what we do to help inform you of what are your customers telling you today and reacting to that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, you know, you bring up a great point. I think to date, so many times we've been focusing on building first-party data, and you kind of look for these all-or-nothing solutions, but the reality that most of our customers face is that you have certain parts of data, partial data in different places, and you want to start using it maybe before you get to 100% perfection. And so finding different platforms that can leverage what strengths each other has. How do you start to put that to use today? How can we start using the partial data to respond to what customers are telling us? And so one of the things our platform does is able to take as little data as we possibly can to start optimizing, because I think progress versus perfection is probably the more reality that we're facing at this moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Progress versus perfection. I'm a big believer in that. And I think just to summarize and then move into more of the next section. So if you think about customer journey, I love that idea. I think that's how I have done it in most of the companies, like looking at your CRMs, looking at listening posts that you have, whether it's your NPS scores, sales calls, Gong, like there's so many other tools to collect a lot of that information and getting insights to understand and laying out your customer journey. And then from there, understanding what are the data signals and where you have to close the gap. Once you have that, then you start thinking about, okay, how do I personalize this now? Because that's the name of the game now, personalization, and we have so many good technologies, including Gen AI. So I would love to start with you, Taylor, around that. And perhaps content always comes to my mind, and the content consumption pattern is changing, right? Like none of us are sitting out there and reading a long form anymore. So would love to understand how are you thinking about, or how should people think about personalizing the content?
Yeah, so I think I feel like we've been talking about personalization for like 10 years now, but the thing is that, we've evolved over time. It was focused on more complex segmentation, which creates higher volume of content that you need. Talking about personalization in terms of one-to-one requires even more content needs. And then we applied it within financial services. Everything needs to be compliant, approved, reviewed. We can't let it start taking over. How do we balance this need between control and the volume of content needed? So looking where we sit is a platform that is able to generate the volume of content while it's on brand, while it follows compliance guidelines, all the different regulations, legal interpretations, working with customers to be able to help generate the volume needed that is compliant. But then how do you actually get it out into market? So taking action on what little data we do have, or whatever we can do in a crawl, walk, run approach as we start to get comfortable, as our tech teams, our legal teams, our security teams get comfortable with AI. How do we go crawl, walk, run versus an all or nothing approach? So little things that we can do, even if you start with an email where I know we have so much data, things like, what if we could just determine at the time of send which version of this message we should send to our customer, because we know that they have a credit card but they don't have a checking account with us, because they have this or they don't have this. So we can be picking up on customer signals in real time and let AI help us decision using this pre-approved body of content how we should be addressing our customers in order to get that maximum impact.
I think that makes complete sense. So leveraging some of the signals and the data you have and trying to predict and augment some of your workflows and the segmentation.
Exactly, and starting with something simple. I think so often we get caught up in that, well, it could do this, and it could do this, and I could know. If we can pull in some like geographical data, I know that does have impact on what customers are interested in. Yeah. If we can't get approval on using that data today, let's try that in a month, that it doesn't have to stop you from personalizing today.
For sure. And I think as I think about personalization, I would love to hear your thoughts, as well as the retargeting, right? Like, because we all know there is so much noise in the system, and it takes like 7, I don't even know if that's a magic number anymore, it's probably gone up, making our lives harder as marketers. But it used to be like you at least need 7 touches before someone will engage in a conversation with you. So I'm curious to understand your viewpoint on personalization in general, as well as retargeting, especially when it goes back to that first party data.
Yeah, so the uniqueness of our platform has enabled us to see a lot. And the one fascinating thing that we've seen over and over and over again is that customer journey is not what you think it is. Mm-hmm. And so many times we think that window is 12 weeks, 7 touches, whatever the case may be. And over again, we see those outliers that are significantly longer and significantly shorter, but a general rule of thumb that I see is a good 60 to 70% are outside of the window that you really think you're in. And that's because we haven't earned the right to their information yet, as brands and marketers out there. Today, in the environment that we're in, we have consumers that are going to give you their information when they're ready. And so in a lot of instances, we've seen studies where, the sales cycle has shrunk so drastically. They've only come to the site a few times, or whatever the case may be, and in actuality, it's 6 months. Yeah. And so being able to act on that information early on, I think, is a critical aspect that we have tried to solve. But to put full throttle aside for a second, is reacting to those signals. Whatever way you want to do that, I think the important thing is ingesting that information so that you can, going back to the customer journey, understand how your consumers are shopping you for a new loan or a HELOC or whatever the case may be. Whether it's new members or current members, you can start to segment out that information on a page-by-page basis, which is our recommendation, to really hone in and isolate those specific consumers and speak to them intelligently.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just say, I feel like too, it's, we all know, we've heard this stat, like everyone's done studies that everyone wants marketing personalized to them. And, we'll think about that as marketers, but as consumers, I think we're all very familiar with it. Okay, I looked up a light bulb on Amazon, I already bought it. I don't need to continue to see this ad for a light bulb. But it's the same in terms of all of our marketing. Like, I think listening to the consumer intent is so important, because if we've done it like we have approached it in the past, of we set up somewhat arbitrary, I mean, it's based on data, but ultimately somewhat arbitrary rules of typically a customer, once they have this product, then they move on to this next. Or if they're in this life phase, this age group, then they're more likely to be getting married, purchasing a home. They're a great target audience for this product. But if you're not listening to their customer signals, maybe they already have one, or they're not in that life stage just because it's the masses. How do we pick up on those individual signals? And I think that's what's important to focus on.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And one thing I know I have struggled as a marketer is, right, like, where do you draw that line in personalization to creepiness, to be honest? So it doesn't feel like you're invading someone's privacy. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and any of you can take it. I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a creepy cool factor, and that line's as clear as this on the stage. Our approach with our clients and is to advertise in a way that isn't obnoxious, right? We don't want to be that, that ad you see on Instagram every single time you open Instagram. That's, that is a reach and frequency level that is unnecessary and actually creates fatigue. But the other piece there is, our approach is obviously very privacy compliant in that manner, but iOS 14, as everyone may remember, that the big, iOS 14 update, and I was at Facebook at the time, Meta now, and it was like this, D-Day. And at the end of the day, what we noticed was consumers were opting to allow to track because they do want personalization. They don't want ads that are unnecessary and that don't fit what their interests are. And so that kind of opened our eyes to a whole new way of thinking. But again, establishing what is that boundary of creepiness. And I think as marketers, it's expected that when I go to a site, I'm going to get ads, in some form or fashion. It's just the manner of which, how deep you go. And I have the privilege of being in multiple verticals. As I said, I head up our whole divisions of growth, and so we have car dealers, we have home services, and there's a plethora of other ways that many industries dig in. I think in the financial space, we have a really great opportunity to give relevant content that is actually fitting their needs. And what we found is, if somebody's looking for mortgages, but you're trying to hit them up for auto loans, you're missing the mark. Mm-hmm. And just a little bit more tailoring can help.
Yeah, and I would add on, I think within financial services specifically, regulations, different rules, yes, they can feel limiting, but that can also provide structure that different AI could learn off of it. How do we play within those? That they're there for good reason, we know as consumers. It can feel restricting, but maybe that helps actually in the end. And then two, I think at the end, marketing is a really creative, it's a human thing. And so as creatives, there is a brand voice that you're keeping in mind, and your brand guidance, the north that you follow, continuing to follow that helps bring some of the humanity back into it without reaching into the creepy side of business. So I don't think any of this should replace some of the creative elements that we're doing, and the guidance and the brand and who you are, because a message that I expect to get from Chase is not the same message I expect to get just because I'm the same person. I don't need to be spoken to in the same way. There's still that context of your brand.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think you also bring another point, which I want to highlight for the audience, is as marketers and as we think about designing customer experiences, I always think about is how do I create something digital first, because that's much more scalable, but still keep that human touch and optimize the human touch points if I can throughout the customer journey. So it doesn't feel like it's a very transactional kind of approach, and it also helps in building that trust. With that, actually, I'm curious, just more from consumer perspective, by show of hands, how many of you trust the personalization done through Gen AI? So if Gen AI was running kind of the personalization completely, how many of you would trust it? By show of hand, anyone? Maybe 50%? Oh my God, we do have a room of skepticals here. Yeah, like would you just put it on autopilot and leave it? Maybe 50%, let it do the foundational work, and then you would want to put some checks and balances? Yeah. And I think that's the reality, especially more so in financial world, I feel like. How do you guys think about that, like that human touch, digital versus human? And how do you set the right checks and balances with the clients you work with, especially in financial industry?
For us, I think it comes to the lady's recommendation of a human touch at the end, where from a creative side, where we've leaned into AI is obviously copy and content and visuals, and we've even started testing with some AI video to help with video assets. Because in our space, being a marketing tech platform, what we encounter quite often is either that institution has an agency, but they don't really want to lean on that agency for more billable hours for creative, or they have a small team, a tight team, and it's really hard to add more creative work for them. And so we lean in and help, and AI has really helped in the generation of that, but informed by, that human touch. And so that's kind of where we've with our AI, outside of our platform, that's kind of where we leave it.
Yeah, I think so. The human touch is the big part. I think yes, AI has been around and we started to play around with it, and it's doing all the things that we don't really necessarily want it to do, but we want it for the operational efficiency. And so we want it to enable us to do more, meaning we are in the loop. And so from a content generation perspective, absolutely, our customers are using us. There's a human in the loop, both on the input of what do we need, what's the strategic direction here, as well as reviewing the assets, going through compliance review. Yes, being aided by our platform that can help flag compliance. It's probably going to flag this. Here's a better way to say that, so that way compliance doesn't shut you down. But that there's an element of working with a tool to make us more effective. But then there's also this other element of it is still newer and it's changing every day. So making sure whatever tools you're working with aren't the black box, that they can explain to you, how is it working? No, not every single step, but start to share those insights from it, that this is the process, these are the factors that it's considering, this is how it will make decisions, the frequency with which it happens. I think knowledge is really power in times of change. Yeah. And so the more that the tools you're using can be transparent in what they're doing, it really helps you understand that, okay, here's where I can have control, here's where I feel more comfortable releasing the reins, so that way I can be freed up to do other things with my time. Yeah. I know it'll jump ahead a little bit, but we have to step a little bit outside of our comfort zone, work with other teams. It's not just a tech team, a marketing team, an operations team, a product team. There's more overlap happening and understanding each other's worlds, so that way you can move forward to do more together.
Totally, and I think that's where having customer as the center point and kind of bringing it back to the customer, it helps in breaking down those silos which exist in a lot of our organizations. I have so many thoughts on where we want to take this conversation. We only have 7 minutes, so I do want to bring up one thing. If we think about what Gen AI or AI will replace, and what are some of the things and skill sets that it will never be able to replace, especially as marketers. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I can get started. I don't think AI can replace the strategy piece. I think humans will still be needed for that. I also think that authentic humor, only humans. You can ask Gemini and it'll come up with jokes. They are funny at times, but it's so hit or miss, and they may not be authentic. So I do think it's that humor authenticity that will not be replaced by AI, and there will always be need for human skills, and as marketers, we will need those skills. Anything else that comes to your mind that AI cannot replace? Empathy. That's a good one. Let's just hope they don't get as smart to develop emotions, right? That's a good one.
So I think AI has limitations on creating new things. It's a model, that learns from what exists, from what it's being fed to, and then it uses math to replicate what it has learned. But it cannot create something that has not been fed to it. So for that, we are needed, right? Yeah. So I think true disruption, true innovation is going to come outside of it, and from the companies that use AI not just as a way to have operational efficiencies, but use the tool to say, okay, how can I now think faster, think differently? Yeah. And for that, you need a person.
Yeah, I think speed is the key factor there. The way we are, like the AI part of our platform, the way we utilize it is we're collecting all this data through a privacy compliant manner, and then we're, as long as the tech lives on the site, like it gets smarter, we learn more, we understand propensity to act, and now like where we are today and where we are in the future is being able to say, okay, all of these households are in the market for mortgages. They've been shopping in the last 30 days on your site, or last 60 days, whatever the case may be. And then you can really like pinpoint, and utilizing speed to market to make decisions faster, to maximize your opportunity in the moment in that customer journey. I think learning to utilize that speed is probably the key takeaway.
Yeah, and that's where like the data systems processes comes in, right? Like how do you leverage it to get that speed, and that ideally could be your competitive differentiator if you get it right. Yeah.
I think the buzz early on, when it's been around for a long time, but a year and a half, 2 years ago, when ChatGPT kind of like stormed our kids' classrooms, really. Yeah. The key like grabber was content creation and creating like basic campaigns and search optimization, things like that. But at the end, that starts to replicate because it's only ingesting the same information over and over again. Yeah. You start to actually, see a fail point.
For sure. Yeah. No. I want to bring it all together, and when we started, we were like, okay, how many people are actually doing it? And we had 2 or 3 people, but like how others have been thinking about it. How can they get started? And I'm a big believer, if you want to learn swimming, you have to dive in and get in the pool. So start creating that framework, but then how can someone get started, especially some of the marketing leaders here, and what should they do as the next steps, tangible takeaways?
So I would say, it's probably no surprise, but like getting comfortable with the tech, like being curious is usually my number one takeaway of what can we do is we can be curious about how does it work, but also why do we work the way we do? So rethinking approaches, I think, to marketing will be necessary as AI becomes more and more prevalent. We're so used to briefing in, I need this asset to go out on this day as a part of this campaign. How can we think about even content in new ways of, let's create libraries that can be used for longer periods of time because we can leverage AI to personalize that to individuals over time. So I think being open to new ways of working, which means working with new partners across the business, working with tech teams, rather than just waiting for tech teams to bring new solutions forward, to understand, develop use cases together. But I think in order to do that, it's easy to say, be curious, try to do all these things. Think about the way you work. you're really ineffective unless you're very clear on what your goals are. Everyone says we need AI, that we have a company-wide mandate, we need to bring in, we need to be more efficient. But what does that truly look like? Are you a company that you are measured on efficiency, and yes, and performance is important, but you know at the end of the day, the primary objectives that you report back on. And that is different for each customer, like each company, each team, but being really clear on what you're trying to achieve with AI will help make sure that you have something that actually works and you're not just putting lipstick on a pig or checking a box. You have to be very clear on your goals so that way you can choose use cases that make sense for that goal. You could do something that's really cool, but if it doesn't matter to the bottom line at the end of the day, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. And then going back to your business goals and looking through use cases and prioritizing could be an approach, and baby steps.
Yes.
Simple is better.
I'll piggyback on that and just say, I talk to marketers all the time, and I've had the privilege to be in this position for a long time. And what I would say is it can be very overwhelming to think about AI as a big broad term, and then as it pertains to your marketing effort. So to simplify that, one of my key recommendations is just pick an amount, 10%, 8% of your marketing budget, 5% of your marketing budget, set it aside for testing. To lean on your curiosity. Be curious, know that it may not work for what you need it to do, but give it a good 4 to 6 months, have a desired outcome, have an idea of what you want to do, but use it as test budget. Don't look for it to be the solve or that solution, but utilize those opportunities to get those readouts to see what works for you and then go from there.
Yeah. It makes sense, and that's the 0 on the screen before we get kicked off. I know we did not get to any Q&As, but we will be around during breaks, so would love to chat further about this topic. Thank you.